All right, we'll dive in. I don't think this is going to be super formal. If anybody doesn't know me, I'm Court. I work for Cleveland Consulting. And we're going to be talking about one of our starter solutions that we've released recently. We'll talk about why we designed it the way we did, what we're doing for design, what major functions it covers, and our development standards a little bit. I think everybody here, with the possible exception of my son, who might be a FileMaker developer one day but isn't yet, probably knows FileMaker well enough where we can play some under the hood, why'd you do it that way stuff, and we'll just see where it goes. So we'll go to the demo. That's the presentation. As all slideshows should be, it was ridiculously short and unnecessary. So let's see, is that a decent size? I guess that's a decent size on that screen. So just a little bit of the theory on why we built this, because there's like a million different starter solutions out there, and it's not like we're building something that people haven't built for free or that FileMaker doesn't include versions of, or very robust things. We've been using this internally for about 4 or 5 years and revving it as new versions come out, and we've been chasing it. And we've got some different versions that we'll release over time, but we thought there was a nice place for something that wasn't quite one of FileMaker's starter solutions, that did a little more than that, but didn't do anything that we didn't want in pretty much every system. So I'm a big fan of things like Seed Code Complete and FM Starting Point. I think they're great systems, but for us, they were hard to use because they do a lot we don't want in every system. So we don't need project management in every system. Sometimes we need some inventory stuff, or sometimes we have processes that are different. So we wanted just the things we want every time. We tried to build that, so we've got different versions for ourselves in there that are more like that. But we wanted a little more, and to be honest, we wanted a slightly different development standards than just the FileMaker starter solutions do. We'd probably never really use one of those to start any real project. So these were born out of a desire for us to have something internally that we could use that fit that middle ground, where we weren't turning off a bunch of stuff every time, and we weren't needing to build a bunch of things that we build every time. So if it fits that need for anybody else, they're welcome to buy it. We loved building it. We've been using it for years, and it's saved us, and to be honest, our clients, just a metric ton of money, because we can start 150 hours of good code into a project and not have to charge them, a ridiculous amount of money to get there. We can have a good, robust development platform with having spent 100 hours on all the little stuff we like to build every time. But to be honest, we run into a lot of 40-hour projects, and a 40-hour client can't afford to build like really the robust, build it once, support it forever environment that we'd like to build every time. So that's why we built it. We've been sharing it with people, and it's got some good traction. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the design first of all. We're big believers in design standards, and in this case, we've leaned heavily into Google's material design. So this probably looks a little bit like a Google app, and if it does, then yay, because it was on purpose. And if it doesn't, then bummer. But I think it does a little bit, and we've actually put that under the hood. I'm going to go a little more under the hood than I have on some of our YouTube videos and stuff like that, because I think you guys will get it. So we have a settings thing up there that you may or may not have expected. And then under the system settings, we've got all the CSS for the material design in here. So the material JavaScript and the material CSS are stored in here, so we can reference those when we need CSS, when we need JavaScript. We do some things with JavaScript in here. Hopefully that stays out of the way completely as we're doing ongoing development. We don't want our everyday FileMaker developers, and we have oftentimes clients who will do ongoing development after we get them up and running. We don't want them to have to deal with the CSS and the JavaScript. So while it's here under the hood, it's not really front and center. One example of that, if I go back to the home screen, is we have this drop-down menu. And I'm sure, as you can all imagine, there's a million ways one could do a drop-down menu like this. So I click on organizations, I go to organizations. In this case, we're doing that drop-down menu with a web data viewer. Not because there's no other way to do it. That's just, we like the look of it. We like the way it interacts. We like being able to build that a little more dynamically. And that JavaScript and that CSS are managed with those two reference fields. Now, maintaining that would be a pain if there wasn't a way to manage that, but zoom that way out to the side because that's wildly unnecessary. But again, under the sprocket and under the little wrench, there's the edit menu. And so we do have a record for each of those items. So those 5 items in the drop-down menu are each their own record. We have the HTML that represents them, the name, where it goes, what sort order it's in, what user sets can't click it. The icon is an SVG, which is just a nice way for us to let anybody get that icon in there since it's in HTML, right? We can build a great interface like FileMaker give us for picking SVGs on buttons when we're in HTML or didn't feel like it. But this is a nice, easy way to get that in here. And then just a little preview of what that's going to look like. So if we go to the Organizations tab, it's going to take us where we need to go. So if I go over to here to Edit Menu and I find Contacts, I could, for example, say, well, the name's going to be, Customers instead. If I reload that menu, it becomes Customers, out here. And it won't go there because I don't have a customer section anymore, right? I'd have to go then change where I'm going. So I can add more items and send them to the right section and all that stuff if I want to. I'm going to fix that or else I will forget what I've done.
That was not plural.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I was about to ask, does anybody keep track of whether that was plural or not? Thanks for looking out for me, Dave. Maybe a little extra something in your pay envelope this month.
Yeah, GoToMeeting doesn't have a good rewind yet.
Yeah.
Recording.
So that's a little bit about our design standards. We've leaned heavily into material design because we had to pick a design standard. And we could have spent hundreds of hours building our own design standard, but I think Google did a good job with material design. We had to pick something. It's nicely recognized across platform. Our customers have liked it. Every system we build doesn't lean heavily into it, but we've got our own style sheet for it. So this theme is the CCI starter. There's a theme in there for it. It's all referenced in there. And so if we change the theme, it changes it everywhere in the layout. So if we get to a customer who super hates green, and we're working at OSU, for example, we've got some OSU clients, I think everything's,
Scarlet.
Buckeye Scarlet or Buckeye Gray, and so it's easy to change those. We can get to those colors pretty easily because we just change them in the theme.
Yeah.
And it reaches everywhere. Because as I think all consultants and development agencies in Central I have done, we have clients at OSU.
Well, I like your choice of material too because it's geared more towards usability design, kind of like what Apple's design standard is.
Right. And we thought about going with Apple's.
Well, yeah,
we just didn't.
You have to read a textbook.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, in contrast, most people choose something like Bootstrap.
Yeah.
Instead, but Bootstrap doesn't really make sense in FileMaker because
it doesn't.
The columns don't resize. Okay.
Right. So we went with material design because we thought it was the best fit.
Yeah.
People on the platform are used to seeing.
Yeah.
Sure. Because users much Apple design not very good.
Yeah. Since Google tends to be a little more ubiquitous than either Bootstrap or one of the other JavaScript frameworks are, or something like Apple's guidelines, which I think look nice, but you're definitely leaning into that Apple world, and I think FileMaker intentionally, and I think in this case intelligently, has positioned themselves more cross-platform than an Apple product.
Yeah.
And so we did too, for what it's worth. Material design also leans nicely, although in this case it doesn't much matter, but to talk a little bit about the under the hood, again, we've leaned pretty heavily into an MVC model in this system. We just like it. I like MVC. I like MVC in Swift. I like MVC in other frameworks that I've used. And although FileMaker is not ideally suited for a rigid MVC deployment, right, there's some things that we would like to take control over as a view controller or something like that we can't.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we do what we can in that world. So just to look at our scripts, for example, we lean into this pretty heavily. So we have some general functions, we have our modules, and so we have a module for each area in the system. So everything that needs a module, we've got the base models, the accounts, notes, everything that needs a model. And then in the app, we've got some config stuff, some private stuff. We've got our script triggers in one folder, not very many because again, it's a starter solution. We do have a folder for all our models. So in this case, only contacts and time records needed models in the scripts. And then under the view controllers, obviously there's more. So if we pull apart just, for example, the home screen, We've got some script triggers on the home screen, again, not a lot, some functions, and then some buttons. So we pull the buttons out into their own folder. Every time you click, if we've been pretty good, and I think we're pretty rigid on this, unless something snuck in, I mean, it's a relatively robust system, but I think every button you click runs a script. That script will set up its environment and then call the function that it needs to call. What that means is that under the hood, there's some one-step scripts that call another one-step script. And that's probably unnecessary until you want to start changing those functions. And it's much easier to have two one-step scripts in chain and then add steps in the appropriate place to set up the environment to have a more robust function than it is to wedge that in later. So we've just leaned into it. So for example, in this case, if I'm clicking find contact, I could imagine this is only running the contact start search screen. I got lucky, I guessed and was right. And so over here in the functions, there's a contact start search. Wow, contact start search under the contacts. If there's any justice in the world, right here, contact start search. Start search. Wow, I'm giving myself a tongue twister without intending to. Contact start search. Contact start search. That doesn't do much other than what you'd expect, other than run the go to detail, enter find mode, go to field. I mean, it's not a complicated script. But in this case, we're running the go to detail script. We're not just going to the layout. We almost never just go to layout to the same layout more than once. If you're going to go to that layout, let's do what we do when we go to that layout. So just to talk a little bit about how heavily we've leaned into MVC. What that means is some very entry-level developers, as we've had at some of our clients, have struggled to do ongoing support on this. But once they get into it, they tend to appreciate it. It just takes a shift from that homegrown developer. FileMaker development kind of evolved much as I think desktop development did. People were, graphic designers for a while because they had a Mac. And there was a phase in FileMaker developers. They were FileMaker developers because they had a Mac and they had a copy of FileMaker. And so there were a lot of people who taught themselves development in FileMaker, never really having a traditional development background. And so we have customers and we found developers that were like that, but we've been able to bring them on because I think this is approachable. It's an approachable MVC. And so it's kind of what we've done under the hood, and we've leaned as heavily into it as we can. Now, we're not card windowing every show custom dialog because we want to take over that view controller. It's just not worth it at that level. Our privilege sets are still managed in FileMaker, although we do have an interface for controlling them, so you don't need to lean too heavily into it. You can go down to staff and you can pick someone like Sally Developer, who I'm currently logged in as. We can look at her FM account. We could deactivate it if we want to or reset the password. And this calls, all those scripts call a bunch of scripts, but one of those scripts does the heavy lifting, and you can copy and paste that into another file and then go add that script step in that file to your account management and manage your accounts in multiple files from this if you want to. So it's a little bit about our development and our design guidelines. Before I dive into the system itself, if anybody wants to ask me a question about that, if anybody has any feedback, if anybody wants to say, I can't believe you did it that way, you raging moron, I'd love to hear that kind of feedback.
Just a weird comment. I started looking at buttons as just another trigger. So a lot of development systems will treat it on clicked or on mouse up in or whatever like that, the same as field exit, field enter, that kind of thing. So it's treating clicks as triggers to me remove the distinction.
Right.
That was, depending upon your target audience, helpful or unhelpful.
Yeah, we didn't go that far down the model, mostly because once we do that, we've done that with some clients on some custom systems where we've leaned farther into that model. What we inevitably get is a question of, well, we've summarized a list of the recipients of this email in a text field. Can I click on their name and start an email? Well, you could, but triggering a button off of a bit of text in a field when you've concatenated 3 names together is something that, while possible in FileMaker, is probably, is probably not the most elegant solution to what they're trying to solve. Maybe it is, but I've always believed that there's a fine line between thinking outside the box and building a fragile solution just because you've thought of a way to do it. And so we prefer to use FileMaker tools just the way they're intended, rather than like sneaking something in. So like, for example, there are ways to do drag and drop in FileMaker. When you click in the field, you select entire contents. When you drag them, you put them somewhere. Those things demo really well, and while they're working, they can be really effective, but to me, they've always felt, and I'll use this term, fragile. And I don't like fragile systems because the support overhead isn't really worth the marginal benefit and workflow that a customer gets. So we've leaned away from some of those more nuanced registering of clicks like that.
I entirely agree with everything that you just said, aside from the part where that wasn't what I was suggesting.
Okay. Well, glad to answer other questions that people don't ask. If you have any of those, let me know.
It was more just I know that FileMaker draws a distinction between a click
Right.
and all the other triggers.
Right.
But in my head, click and tab into are both triggers.
Right.
Like there was one trigger that FileMaker always supported.
Right.
And then they added more triggers.
Right.
And for some bizarre reason, they said stick them in a different interface.
Right.
But it's just another trigger.
Yeah.
So I was doing the folders that you were putting the scripts in.
Gotcha.
Was only the thing. Like,
Yeah.
here is all the different ways that moving around in this system can cause code to run.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. That's a much better question than the one I answered. I wish I'd answered that one first. But I can at least be on record for having said something smart once, because I'm not sure what I'm going to say to that one. Yeah, so as a way to reframe that question is more maybe why do we have a script triggers folder and a buttons folder rather than having a triggers folder?
It was less of a question and more a comment.
Yeah.
Because the FileMaker way of doing it is clicks and buttons are entirely distinct and different from script triggers.
Then on-field enter, on-field exit, on-field modifies.
Wildly different things that act entirely differently, aside from the fact that they're almost exactly the same,
Right.
and act almost exactly the same, but there's different interface elements within the design service. So both answers make sense to me.
Yeah.
I was just pointing out that when you're breaking those things up, depending upon exactly who your audience is and where their FileMaker experience is, either answer, I think, is correct.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right. Just to go back in here a little bit, like what we're doing is we're saying on, let me get down to the app. So we have a script triggers, and then on our models, we have contacts, and we have all these things that could be on view controllers, for example, we'll have menu staff contact. And so under menu, well, we have simple one. Some of these folders will have buttons, script triggers, and other things. I'm not finding one right now. But yeah, so here's a good one. Contact detail. We have script triggers and buttons, right? That could just be triggers. And we could put buttons in a subfolder and script triggers in another folder. You're right, the designation probably leans a little hard into at the end of the day, and probably at the beginning of the day, this was a FileMaker system, and we didn't lean very far away from the FileMaker-iness, word patent pending, of the system, and hard enough into the MVC-ness. I can't clone that because I'm sure, copyright that because I'm sure somebody said that before. And we could have. I think this is just more of at the end of the day, we didn't want to disavow FileMaker too hard. But I can certainly see the argument either way.
It's vocabulary that's familiar to FileMaker.
Yeah. And some of this is we hand this to customers and.
In MVC systems that I've done, it's not two separate things. It's one thing, and it's called events. Right. Instead of triggers.
And that, what you said that most resonates with me is at the end of the day, it is a bit arbitrary. We've arbitrarily decided this way.
You've arbitrarily decided to follow the FileMaker standard, which is a totally defensible decision.
Yeah. Leaned a little away, but at the end of the day, Swift developer looking at this would be like, what's the difference between a button and a script trigger? And I would say, well, one you make with a layout tool and the other you make, you know. So yeah, one you make by gathering a group of objects on a layout up and then assigning them to a button and then never being able to edit them again until 17. Or something like that.
That's what developers are going to say, why don't you have 8 different actions for this button?
Yeah. So yeah.
Any sort of developer I know would take a look at a file with 130
Yeah. Yeah. Not quite 130, but we got a fair number of layouts in there. So, yeah. Reasonable question. Don't have a great answer other than we started 5 years ago and this is where we ended up.
So I didn't notice, you did try to make these both desktop and iPad friendly?
Yes. They should be theoretically desktop and iPad friendly. We didn't build iPhone layouts for them just because we don't have that many clients doing things on iPhones.
Not with the web viewer navigation.
No, not with web viewer navigation. We wanted it too much to just support web. We just didn't support WebDirect. To be honest,
it might inherit it eventually, though.
Yeah.
If they decide to
I really like WebDirect for some things, but nothing customer facing, and so many of our customer systems face their customers. WebDirect fails so poorly with concurrency, unless you happen to have a site license that last I heard still gets unlimited seats if you have a full on-site license for WebDirect. So it just, like if you hit that, if you have 25 concurrent users,
so limited to
yeah, you have so many limitations. You've got 25 concurrent free client users and you get that 26 one that just says sorry. So we would never use that for something where our client systems are facing their customers. Custom web development is so relatively easy that we just don't use WebDirect very much. I know a lot of developers do, we just don't. And those layouts are pretty easy to build. We built a system this week that had a pretty strong iPhone component. We just built some iPhone layouts. It's relatively easy to do. You know, you turn on
We're working on WebDirect now.
the WebDirect compatible checkbox in the scripts, and you just, you know, you code around them. Like we didn't code around many of our functions to say if platform equals, or, you know, do X. Like we just didn't do that because for us and for many of the developers that we've worked with, that is an outlier, and we didn't want all that overhead in these systems. Now I know with the ifs you jump right over them, and it's not a performance overhead, but we just didn't do it.
Yeah, we're working on WebDirect right now. I haven't used it since 13, and it's a long way.
It has. It's
the visual fidelity.
Yeah, it's very good.
Everything is fixed.
I'm not down on WebDirect. We just don't use it that much because the deployment failover is so weak.
Yeah, we don't have that problem. What else we're is about the JavaScript stuff.
Yeah.
You can use JavaScript when you're WebDirect, long if not calling above a certain thing.
Right. And the web viewer on top of objects just doesn't work very well. This is another place we're using, so just to lean into this question a little bit, this is another place where we're using web data viewers for something that could have very easily been done in FileMaker, but we just wanted it a certain way. So this chart, for people who are familiar with charting, you probably know you could build this in FileMaker really easily. But if you notice when I went into layout mode, it is not in FileMaker.
You can build ugly charts in FileMaker.
Yeah. Well, and you can build charts quickly and easily that are dynamic. They didn't look the way we wanted, and they lacked one feature that we really wanted, which is the feature that everybody always asks us for, is like, well, what records make that bar up?
Yeah. Oh.
I want to click on that bar and get those records. So we say, yeah, sure, I'd be glad to show those to you. And in this case, I think it's one record because we have lousy sample data in our invoices. But this one record makes that up, so I can go look at it and say, oh, well, we had a great month that month because somebody ordered $315,000 worth of something in our sample data. And for the fact that it, you know, fades in is nice and it follows the material design standards, and that is great, but we wanted it for the click on the bar. That is the most commonly asked question we get for charting in FileMaker. And unfortunately, FileMaker's native charting doesn't, and probably for a long, long time will not support on-click triggers on individual bars. They're like their UI just doesn't have a way to really deploy that well. And they get asked for it. I know we talked to the engineers and color schemes, yeah. So we get more control here than we do with a non-WebDirect. So we built that one because we wanted the framework for it, and that's all controlled again under the hood here over in the system settings on this in our D3 and C3 and our JavaScript and CSS stuff here. Now, should we have used a different charting? You could argue any number of them, but this is the one we picked.
Yeah.
Who'd you pick?
D3, which is a fine one.
Yeah.
Is it the best one ever? It's a fine one. Different cases, different uses might call for one over another, but this is one we're comfortable with. It's had some longevity. I like that its styling is very dynamic. I like that it integrates with FileMaker really well. Just because I think everybody here is a FileMaker developer under the hood. If I go look at this, right, this is a really simple, can you read that? Yeah, I think you can read that. So this is the JavaScript. The data is right here. It's just one global variable. We set that on a script. If you have FM perception, you can pop that in a DDR and see where we set that. It's in one script under the invoicing that we load every time we come to the home screen. It loads super fast. And the styling is all, I mean, that is not a big web page. That's pretty easily understood. And we get some things that FileMaker charting really doesn't give you. It's not going to look like much in this one because we only have one category, but I could turn categories off and on. So if I have departments, I could pass departments in here and I could show what department's invoicing. And right now, this is passing, these are getting the invoices from a certain year. We have some different home screen looks just because, variety is the spice of life. So we have some different looks. And one of these, you can select the year. I don't have sample data for any of the years, so it's going to be very boring. But look, it goes away.
But you're still using some native FileMaker controls.
Yeah, it's all native FileMaker controls except for the actual chart. The actual display of the bars and except for that bit in the middle.
Yeah. But rather than doing 5 different dashboard layouts, you're doing slide controls.
Right, we're doing slide. And in this case, just slide controls mostly for us to say, be able to show a client, hey, we could do some different looks.
Yeah.
On this one, the icon goes there. On the other ones, they don't. But that's, pretty good fidelity.
Are the media cards HTML views?
No, they are not.
Those are native FileMakers?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So.
It's a good example of using tools to make a good design.
Oh, thanks. So, yeah, we do have a version that we thought about putting in this where the whole dashboard was JavaScript and you could turn on and off different things, but it became very hard for our customers want to add things, right? They want to add vehicle management later on because they get a fleet, or they want to add, workstation management because they want to start managing their computers and they want to call us. So they want to be able to copy the organizations box and drag it down and change them really easily. So.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
I do too.
That makes it easier.
Yeah, because while there are a lot of ways to run a successful business, I've never leaned very heavily into the write code so complicated they have to keep you around forever.
Yeah.
I would rather code myself out of a job if I can and get more customers through.
Not doing
Good
much
reputation.
Perl bash scripting right now.
So anyways, if there's no more questions, and I'm glad to take as many as you want on standards, design, interface, that kind of stuff. Let's look a little bit under the hood at the sections, and then you can ask me questions about that part if you want. And then we can, I'm not sure I know any more than anybody else, but we can play some rounds of Stump the Chump or brainstorm why we did things a certain way. So I'm going to go look at contacts. Many of these sections are similar. So we have a contacts and an organizations and an invoices here. Under the menu, we also have a staff and a time clock admin. I'll talk about those towards the end. Contacts are just what you'd expect. They're the people under the system. We've leaned pretty heavily into this model again with material designs. We have the details, the contact notes, very light, only the fields that we think we need every time. So first name, last name, organization, title, department, website, and staff assigned. These are our 3 staff members. Pretty simple stuff. I can click on the arrow next to the organization and go to the related organization. If there's no related data under a thing, we show a little card to say, add your first phone and email. We can remove that. Under these, we have a little drop down. So if I go back, we've got a slightly modified, if anybody's used to it, seed code, John Sindler's Backmagic. We've got a version that we kind of took back when he first released it. We've kind of maintained it for ourselves and kept it moving forward and doing the things we want it to do, but it leans heavily on C-Code's back magic technique that John came up with 14 and a half years ago or whenever he first built that thing. So if we go back here, under the contact information, we could start a phone for their default phone or email for their default email, and under addresses, we can add another address. We use little drop-down menus for that, leaning the material design. Under the notes, we have the list of notes. We can click to slide that out. We have a little bit of light notification, so if I turn that on, and he hasn't seen it before, I can click a button. If I send that to him, it would send through the SMTP settings that you could have put in back here if you wanted to. You could put all your SMTP settings here, and then it would send an email off to that staff member notifying him. We did that mostly so we could have one central notification script. Do with it what you want. SMTP is the easiest to abstract, but there's a million different ways to notify people. From the dope slap user from their chair plugin that we all wish somebody would write someday, to the SMTP to send SMS message, to whatever you want to do in that script to do it. Integrate with whatever you want. So we've got slight, light, simple notification triggering there. Organizations work much the same way. So if we go to an organization, we have their details, their notes. Notes work just like they did over in Contacts. Click a bus button. You have a phone call. This is my note. It's not rocket science. It's simple stuff. You can see the related contacts, because right now in the system, a contact can work for one organization, but an organization can have a number of contacts. We just did a one-to-many, not a many-to-many there, so we only have the portal here. And we do have light invoicing in this, so if we could click a plus button here, or I could more intelligently go over here to get to invoices, because I just don't have that many. If I go back to the list view, I've got 8 invoices in there. The invoicing is pretty light and straightforward. We have some details over here with statuses, so I can click on this and see the dates that it was sent. And I can say, oh no, wait, I didn't send that, and it rolls it back. I could send that, and it would say, do you want to mark that sent? It does not send it. We're not printing it and making an email and attaching the PDF. We're just starting the script. Every client's going to have their own process for sending it. We just wanted a script to work off of there. We do have a print version of it, right, that uses the icon from the settings and the address and stuff like that, but we're not running this print in the send. We're just marking it sent. We could mark it paid. And then we could click over here and say, oh no, wait, we didn't pay it. Oh no, wait, and we roll that back stage by stage. We didn't send it. We have nice little staged stuff there. We have organizations and contacts, some unenforced but fields for terms and tax rate and things like that. Tax rate is calculated on the invoice. We have line items. The line items do not deduct from an inventory, central inventory management. They're just lines. There's no tracking of hours. There's no tracking of inventory. You might run a service industry and not want to track inventory. You might run a machine shop and build to spec, and you don't have inventory some parts and you do kitting. We're not picking a fight here. We're just building the foundation. Taxable or not, and just enter what you want. Description, quantity, price each, and we do the math for the total for you, because it's just that easy. No rocket scientist here. Thing to sell 200 of them for $1. Things aren't taxable still. Little light notes for the invoice. These external notes do not show on the invoice, for what it's worth, and it's that simple.
That's where I always put how much of a jerk you have.
Yeah, exactly. You can, and well, we have one client who keeps track of how complicated customers are to make happy. They do asphalt, driveway paving, and sealing, and they have some customers that complain every time they come out. They want to know that, so they either charge them appropriately more, or send their best crews, or stop taking their calls, or whatever the thing they're going to do is. Then obviously we have a canceled status, so I can cancel that invoice. And then it goes away. So pretty straightforward invoicing. Not a lot there, but it is there, right? It's the start of invoicing. We also have staff management that I talked about briefly. Details about the staff member. We have an email so we can send them the notification if we want to. We have account management. We have their timesheet. We do have timesheets in there because so many of our customers do some sort of staff tracking, whether it's for payroll or we wanted some sort of timekeeping system. So I'm going to trigger this. I'm going to hope I remember the password to get out of it. I'm not. I'm going to have to close it. But we have a time clock admin. So this is the basic, very simple time clock so we can keep track of date ranges or staff. So we can see all the Sally developers clock in and clocks out. She clocked in once back in March. I reset this every once in a while when I demo it. I could display the non-clock out, so when she didn't clock out, good for Sally, she's clocking out, or good for me, because I guess I'm Sally in this case. I clock out every time I clock in. And I can start time clock mode. So this is meant, we have a number of clients that use this, they put it on an iPad. These are buttons if you want. And I think if there's any sense of justice in the world, Sally is 1, 2, 3, 4. I use very simple and easy to remember sample data. So we've clocked Sally in. If I click the clock in button, successful, she's clocked in. And then we go back here, and then somebody else can come in and clock in. We have a number of clients that use things like this. These modules are really pretty easy to pull out because that whole MVC thing. So we've had clients that we just pulled this out of to put in another system. I can come back here and go 1, 2, 3, 4. I can also type in, but showing off how cool the touch screen could be. And then I could start a break for her, end the break, I can clock her back out, and then she's now worked another 2 minutes, 4 months after she worked her last 5 minutes or something like that. I can click this lock way up here and exit time clock mode, which I think either has the super, and this is in our help, but I'm going to take 2 guesses because I think it's either unlock or password. I think it's unlock. No?
We changed that several times.
Yeah. Password. It is cleverly password. It's in the help document. So that is a quick overview of all the sections in this. We could do a slightly deeper dive on the settings, but I don't know that it's really that useful. It's probably pretty straightforward. This is a Google Maps key that we got before they made you have to start putting payment information to get a Google Maps key. So people are welcome to use that for free all they want, but it's limited to their unpaid functions. But you can use that to see where addresses are. You can start the time clock mode from in here. This says whether we do notifications on new or updates. You get over here, you can edit the menu, which we talked about. You can view the system errors. In many of our scripts, we log errors as records. So when things don't go the way we expect, we test a lot of our script steps and we log those errors in a table because that's how we like to do it. Almost none of our clients ever look at this, but it's nice when you're doing persistent development. One example is, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with what started, I think, under the hood of Six Fried Rice's script parameter passing techniques. We call it pound P. A lot of people have called it a lot of different things. But if I go over here, for example, this script, mbase find, expects a layout. You can also pass it a key name and a key. And so that's our parameters. If you pass a script the wrong set, so in this case, we're doing if pound P, that breaks out all those parameters into local variables. If people aren't familiar with how that works, all the code's in here. We could talk about that if people aren't familiar with that. Then at the end of this, else exit script with error, and that error is what triggers that, whatever error we got. This if pound P, if error is in 0, this does all the error creation stuff. And then we exit script with whatever error we got there. So perform script M error create, and then we pass all these functions in here. So this perform script error create requires the error, and you can also pass a title, message, script name, and whether or not to log it. So you could no log it, you could just pass that back out and do something with the error, or by default we're logging it. So we do that everywhere. Since all those scripts already have that, as you expand it, you can expand the parameters and then you'll get the error logging. Yes?
Is the M in M error create model?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
I like when the script names make sense.
Yes.
Based upon my understanding of the system. It's so fascinating.
Yes, it is tremendously helpful to us as well. Our only quandary with this, and the M doesn't cost us anything, it's 2 characters, an M and a dot, right? That's pretty low cost. But we have had some scripts with some pretty robust parameters where we start to run into script naming length limits, which can be a bit of a pain. We do some stuff. We have a number of clients. I'll actually show you a system that we started with this and it grew, just so you can see where it ended up. But he does some very robust automatic communication. So we're using tools like Elastic Email and Delighted, which you can use to send communication out to people. So he uses Elastic Email for his scripted marketing email stuff. It's like Constant Contact, but they don't charge you. Literally, I think your first 50,000 emails a month are free or something ridiculous like that. It's an amazing tool. But we want to pass a lot of parameters. And so if we're passing a lot of parameters to that, and we're passing a lot of parameters into our function script from our button script, right, we've had to sometimes narrow our parameter names. It can't be HTML message body. It's got to be HTML message. Because we don't want to burn another 20 characters on a parameter name or something like that. So we have run into a bit of a problem with things like that. So yeah. But yeah, we do that. Our scripts should be MDOT if they're model scripts. We do view controllers in the MVC, so we don't do VC scripts. But the model scripts, it's more important for us to identify those. Again, development standards are unique to everybody. The only caveat, the only problem we have with releasing to this world is I know one of my quandaries with using other people's starter solutions is I don't always want their development standards. For the very serious developer, I don't expect that this is a huge boon to you unless you super love our development standards and wish you thought of them, but I don't think that's the case for most long-term professional developers. But at least I don't think they're a burden to anybody. So we do that with that script parameter passing. And we do include with this, and I think pretty well documented. I'm gonna put myself out here and say that they're pretty well documented, custom functions. So we have our pound custom functions are those pound P script parameter passing functions. So pound P is the one you call. You just wrap your script in if pound P, then put your error trapping under the else or after the if or whatever you want to do with that. And then that functions call all these. But we have some other functions in there that people might find useful, and you're welcome to them. We've got some JSON management, some HTML encoding stuff, and some list management functions. In these, I believe we have properly credited people, thanks to the guys at Six Fried Rice for the parameter passing code, for example. We wrote our last update to this back in 2009, so it's been closer to 9 years that we've been working on this, I guess. But we haven't had to update the parameter passing in a while. We pretty much settled on the model for doing this, and until FileMaker gives us more than a single text line for passing parameters, we're probably going to stick with it. So
currently FileMaker is saying JSON is the solution to that problem. Thank you, this issue is solved.
Yes, which I understand. All of those words in that sentence make sense to me. I understand the meaning of all of them. I just tend to disagree. So that's fine. FileMaker has long been one of those tools, and I know it frustrates all of us as developers, but I can step back a half a step and appreciate that they give us a toolbox, and they say, every tool has its own wrenches and hammers. If you don't like our toolbox, go somewhere else. We think we make a pretty good one. And there's not much I can't pull off with FileMaker. Sometimes the hoops are bigger that I have to jump through or smaller that I have to jump through than I like. Sometimes they're more on fire than I want them to be. Sometimes the guy's moving around on me a little more than I want them to be. But at the end of the day, I get through the hoop. You know, it's okay. I'm a big boy. I can take it. Bigger than I used to be some days. So, you know, there's some custom functions in here you're welcome to pull apart. And I think we've pretty well credited everybody. If anybody watching this on the interwebs finds that we have used your code and did not properly credit you, let me know, and I'll publicly humiliate myself in apologies and give you all the proper credit due. But I think we've been tried to be good community members in that sense. So if you have any questions on this, I'm glad to answer them. If we've got time, it's now Quickie Mart time. It's 7-Eleven, so I can show you something that we built for somebody else. I hadn't thought about this being. Are we recording this broadcast?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna have to because this.
You can You can pause your GoToMeeting.
Yeah,
stream.
so I'm going to go voice on this because we do have a client's information in this, and I don't want it to be mineable. People can hear it, but I don't want people to be able to pull it apart. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to go here to this, and I'm going to do that.
Everybody should react very auditorially to what we see.
Seem as if what I'm showing is amazing from here on out. Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, somebody is on that. I think you might be able to credit. I don't know if you saw on your GoToMeeting control panel, but we fixed it.
Oh, cool. I did not see that. So I'm going to open up a system that we've built for a long-standing customer and talk a little bit about what he does with it. So he runs tennis camps. He's a tennis coach at OSU, and he's been to this group before. He's a pretty good developer in his own right. Yeah, pretty good developer in his own right. I logged in as the developer, and we don't have a staff member for the developer, so he complained a little bit, and coincidentally threw an error in the log file that we talked about earlier because I logged in as somebody who doesn't exist. And he manages camps for universities, so he has a lot of campers that he manages. And as you can see, this has a lot of that material design look to it. So if I, for example, go to his sessions, these are the sessions that he runs. So he has 284 sessions at different colleges. So this one's at the College of Worcester. And if we look at his system, if I, for example, go look at one of his campers, we could see some of the communications he does. So this are some of the email notifications he does. So we've used a simple popover window. We send, back on June 9th of 2017, we sent a confirmation email to this camper's contact, and then they got a balance due and they got a pertinent information. They did get a late fee alert, probably because they paid in full and didn't need a late fee alert. They didn't need a supplemental waiver. This camp didn't need a particular supplemental waiver. And they didn't get their delighted evaluation because we just added that in 2018. He was sending those manually. Now we're sending those out automatically. Delighted is a great web service with, I got to say, just amazing support for developers with a pretty robust API, I don't know what an API is, an API where you can send them an email and they get a little web link that they can click and just evaluate how you did. So you can ask some questions and you can pass parameters. So he passes the location and the session and the dates and things like that in there, and he gets great feedback, and so he can evaluate that stuff. We're going to start pulling that back in probably next week at the end of the season.
And that is just delighted.com.
I believe it's delighted.com, yes. A great little tool, a really robust API, and I have as yet, I hope if the guy who runs that site hears me, I have yet to send him a tech question email and have him not respond in like 4 hours. I don't know how the guy does it. He seems to support his own tool, and the way I wish I could support all my own tools. I need help to support my tools that well. It's
pretty cheap too.
Yeah, it's very inexpensive and an incredibly robust API to find out how delighted your customers are. It's a great little tool. And it's got an API for putting the next thing we're going to do is take this guy's website, our customer's website, and start putting the delighted feed on his homepage so you can just scroll through the feedback. It's a great little tool, so I would recommend it. So you can see we've built out a pretty robust system for this particular customer with campers, attendance, location, sessions, mailing list, coaches, expenses, to-dos. We've got a pretty robust, I'm not going to show you because I don't want to show you his money, a pretty robust expense management. So he puts all of his expenses broken down by location so he can know how much he spends at Capital University or at the College of Worcester and how much he spends on each session and each year and for each coach and for each student. So he has his per student cost at each location so he can know, I get 200 kids at Capital University. I'm making up these numbers. I don't think he gets 200 kids at Capital University. It's a small college. But I spend the same amount as I do at Worcester where I get 800 kids. I should either start spending less or start getting more kids there. So he can break it down as per student cost. We started to build the reporting in this. I think we're going to switch over and do the reporting in Tableau because Tableau is a great end user reporting tool. We can pull all his data from FileMaker into Tableau and he can slice and dice. We still sell a product called CC Pivot, which is for building pivot tables in FileMaker. Great little tool, and we're probably going to stop selling it here pretty soon if Tableau keeps beating us, because their tool is just better in some ways. Now, you can't put it directly on a FileMaker layout. You got to go into Tableau's tool, so there is still a place for CC Pivot. We use it some places.
But you can embed a Tableau link into a web viewer.
Yes, you can.
FileMaker.
Yeah. So it's a very good tool.
Yeah. And also with its caching, it's a lot faster than FileMaker.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Now we do all our work for our CC Pivot in JavaScript, so it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But again, at the end of the day, it's
Are you hosting this one?
This one is being hosted on Amazon. So this is being hosted on an Amazon AWS server. We are not leaning too heavily into the Amazon, the FileMaker cloud. Okay. We're doing direct Amazon servers where all our clients have their own license, and then they're either hosting on one of our servers or dedicated servers server of their own. Cloud keeps out of the platform just a couple features that I really need.
Yeah.
So we have not gone into, we don't have a lot of clients for whom cloud is appropriate, who need our help with hosting. So in this case, it's being hosted on an Amazon server. In this case, it's one that we set up for him, but he does his own licensing.
And it's a price difference of like 10 or 20 bucks a month.
Yeah. Amazon servers are so inexpensive.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is they're very, very scalable. We had a client who had an Amazon server, and they store a lot of images, not this guy, and somebody else. They store a lot of images, and they got an error because their hard drive filled up. And I just hadn't caught it. It's maybe on me. We're not their, we're not their DBA, but maybe I should have noticed. So their hard drive filled up, and it took me about 5 minutes to double the hard drive space on their Amazon server, and I didn't have to reboot it or anything. Just reallocate more storage space, and you can do that same with performance. If you need, you can just basically, it's almost as if there's a dial on the dashboard, and you can just start turning up the speed, get them more performance if they want. It's an amazing little tool for, I'm sure Amazon does not support this channel, but
probably not.
Don't forget to link and subscribe. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about where this can go. This has obviously gotten much larger than the starter solution we had, but we started with it, and for him, it's been very appropriate. But he's got a 4-person company, and he runs, 80 camps a year. Well, give or take.
And it looks like the other thing that's good about using something like material design is that everything makes sense when you start adding a bunch of modules.
Yeah. It all still fits. Now he's moved his preferences down here because he wanted to get to them. Oh, yeah. But it's the same screen that he could have gotten to from here. He just wanted a button down here for it. That's fine. He's done a lot of this work himself. He did not need us to do most of this work. And we do some heavy lifting. We did the API integration with Elastic Email because that's, it's harder. It's, curl and things like that.
But like I can tell just by looking at it that like the new buttons of the Find buttons being gold color. Yeah. That's something I'm going to click on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's pretty easy stuff for him to even modify. Now he's a pretty good FileMaker developer, but it hasn't been too complicated for him to dive under the hood and understand our standards. So,
you want to turn your screen sharing back?
Oh yeah, I'll turn my screen sharing back on. Yeah. I only have one screen. We're asking which one I'll share. That was Postman over there. Pay attention to whatever I have typed in there. If nobody's using it and you're playing around with curl at all, get Postman. Yeah. If anybody's not using Postman and you're using curl, stop it and get Postman.
I talked about it last month. We did it.
Okay, I thought you'd done an API class, and I assumed you'd cover Postman on that one because everybody who's doing API stuff should have Postman.
FileMaker Chuck Norris Max integration.
There you go.
We were just looking around for APIs.
So from a business standpoint, your client calls you, says, hey, I'd like to do X, Y, Z, and has some of the components that you already have. You got a base costing CC begin and then layering on your development?
We are not. So what we do is we sell them a copy of CC Begin, and it's sold on our website. We had a starter price for it that I believe was $8.99. We're going to bump that price up, I think, to $12.99.
Yes.
at the end of the month. We've got a discount code that we'll share with anybody who's listening to us now that's 20% off. That code is Cofmug. In case you can't remember that,
Case
that's,
sensitive or?
I don't think case matters.
It's not case sensitive.
All right.
So COFMUG gets you 20% off through the end of this month,
Through August 1st.
through August 1st. So until so it's gonna, so I'll get you 20%. Get you 20% off CC Pivot too if you want.
Anything in the store.
Anything in the store. And we've got a little timer app that we sell for $25, so it gets you 25% off, 20% off that. But just, for cheering for the home team. So what we do is we sell it to them for whatever the going rate is at the moment, right now at $8.99 or $12.99 next month. And then we start from there. We are like most of you are, custom developers. And so we try not to think, how can I wedge this into the tool I have? We just do our needs requirement. We do our user story. We're big on user stories. There have been sessions at DevCon about using user stories for system design. I think Don Levan does that one? I might be giving him credit for something that he doesn't do. I don't know. If somebody does that session, I should be a better person to know who does that session. But there's a good YouTube video on user stories, but it's a great way to do needs analysis.
Yeah.
And so we try and just analyze what a customer needs. And if we can start with this, great. We have internally taken some very stripped down versions of this, which is not much more than a home screen, back forward buttons, our error handling, script parameter passing custom functions, and a settings table. So no other tables, which is pretty easy to build out of this. Start deleting things and you can get yourself there. Thanks. And so we will start with that sometimes if there's just, if even something this small is inappropriate. If they don't need, it's really easy to repurpose invoicing to any financial topic. And really pretty much it's really just header and lines. You can call it almost any line item topic you want to. The fields that make this an invoice are the dollar ones. It's like you're 12 fields away from this being anything really. And to turn it into purchase orders is trivial. It's really just a label change. But we don't always start with this, but if we do, we don't. I got a good friend in the industry, a lot of you may know him, Kirk Bowman, no relation. And he was a big advocate of value pricing, which is the premise that you price something by the value it delivers to the client. I get along with Kirk really well. I just kind of fundamentally disagree. I've always believed that there's two ways to succeed in business. Get as much dollar for the value as you provide. I've kind of taken the other approach, which is deliver as much value for the dollar they give me. Maybe that means I get paid less dollars, but I like that business model better. So we don't do we start at 100 hours in, I can get there in an hour, so I'll charge you 40, and we both benefit. I've never done that, but I know people who do it. I think everybody still benefits. It's just not been my model. So. That was probably a much longer answer than you needed. I tend to ramble sometimes. So, any other questions? If not, I'd like to show you two more things and just get some light feedback, because I figure I can get some feedback from a smart group of people. So in this folder, you might notice I've got a folder called Future. We've got the next two versions of this that we're going to send out. One is called CC Retail, one's called CC Services, because we're nothing if not consistent in our unclever branding. So CC Retail is much like CC Begin, but it does a little bit more on the retail side. So the big difference between CC Retail and CC Begin is we've leaned harder into the invoices and products. So now we've got a products table with actual inventory deductions and really triggering that whole rolling inventory management thing. So under the products, we have a few basic products with SKU numbers and costs, and we have the inventory updates and ins and outs, whether it's inventoried, how many are in stock, and reorder quantities and things like that. The invoices have been triggered against internal notes on the products, and all the inventory transactions when you're buying stuff in and out of inventory. We also have a more robust invoices model. So the invoices can either be ad hoc items or inventoried items. So we've got a little inventory tag there. If that item has been, and we can't add something to this one because this particular invoice has been sent already. I don't know if I can find an unsent invoice so I can add something to this one. Then we can say, are we selling a product or a product service or a manual item? So is it an inventory thing or am I just doing an ad hoc item? So we've got a little management there. And so it's a slightly more robust invoicing model and a slightly more robust inventory model. Apart from that, it's very similar, other than, as you can see, we've got a slightly different home screen chart. We just wanted a different chart to talk about that increased complexity. So we've got amount and quantity, and we've got another company, and I can turn these off, and a third company. And so you can see how that stuff works a little bit more. I don't have anything for a test category. I could, but I just don't have anything in my sample data for that one. And then we have another one, which is CC services. This, as you might imagine, is much like CC Begin, but we've leaned harder into the services model. So we have projects instead of inventory items, and our invoices then more closely reflect the projects. I don't know why I picked another home screen. So if I go down to projects, then we have projects with tasks and milestones and notes and time entry by project. And then when we get to our invoices, we have invoices that can then have items that include, and again, I got to get some invoice that hasn't been paid. I can just make a new one. But we can add invoice items. We can add hours to an invoice from the project. I can't do it from here. But you can add hours. You can build an invoice out of the hours from a project. We did one other thing just because we kind of liked it under the projects. Let me just go. Our notes support markdown formatting, just because we wanted to play with it, and we wanted a more complex and more visually appealing notes interface. And so we had a developer that wanted to play with that. And so we've got a markdown enabled notes thing for the project. Just to play with that a little bit. And then tasks and milestones and the notes and the time, just like we talked about before. So my question to you is, we want to release these about 1 every 4 months to about 3 a year. We're about due to release the next one. Do you guys have any opinion on what you would like to see come out next? It's not a huge user group, but I'm just kind of curious. We've been asking some groups of people.
I was struck in this one, in the project that you had shipping. There was a shipping tab on one of the, I think it was the invoice.
Oh.
In this one.
Yes, it's not.
It's kind of an odd one to have. But I get that.
Yeah, it's just, it changes this information. There's no shipping integration. We left the shipping in from the last invoices. That is just a tabbed header with some fields. So could we have pulled it out for it? Yeah, we could have. We just didn't pare it down anymore.
The only challenge I had, I got really excited for a moment on CC Retail.
Okay.
Because I thought it was POS.
Ah, yes.
That's my exact question. I had a question about
That's exactly what I thought. I thought, great, wow, this is really cool, because yeah,
well, who's your target customer? I would start with.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, so our target customer is somebody who needs a inventory management. Maybe retail is a bad name. Maybe we should call it CC inventory, because it's CC Begin plus inventory management, right? It's not retail in the
CC reseller.
CC reseller. So we've done things for people that are light manufacturers who build an inventory and sell.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the people in the maker space could probably use something like this. Their payment processing, and we have done stuff for people that need point of sale. We've got a client, Baker's Acres, that sells a lot of plants every year. They need point of sale, but they're using Square or PayPal. There are a lot of cash registers, and it's very easy to integrate with those things. Rather than building Apple Pay integration and all that stuff in a FileMaker system, I think it makes a lot more sense to tie a couple simple hooks into a payment workstation, like a Square register or something like that, and pass your inventory to Square. Let Square trigger your inventory. We've got the scripts to trigger it. All those cash registers have all the good ones have great integration tools. And so to integrate that with FileMaker is really very little work. You just do your inventory deductions. All you're doing is passing to the cash register an amount, some inventory items. And so that's very easy API integration. You send them the transaction, they process it and send you a result back. And then you put that payment information in where we already have places to store payments. So we have not built the point of sale part of the retail because we think that's been built so often. Just like for none of these have we built, the base for accounting, receivables, payables, that kind of stuff, payroll, GL, because QuickBooks Online or whatever else you want to use is so robust and cost effective.
Do you integrate though with them?
Yeah. Now we don't have the stock integration for those in these because it's so easy. We have the script that triggers the print receipt, right? The send, the print receipt, or whatever status. Yeah. And what we would say is on one of those statuses, just call a simple API integration. It's a line. And then when it passes it back, you get those results and you put them where you want. It's literally just it's a one-line integration usually. Because we're building all the components. They're all available to you when you're here. Just what do I send to the register, and then what are they going to tell me when I'm done? So those are so easy to do. We haven't built a point of sale. There was a guy in the FileMaker community who had a great cash register. He used to take the DevCons year after year. Yeah, and it was a great one. But these days, I'm just not sure the FileMaker cash register makes a lot of sense anymore. I think there's so many great other registers that are super easy to integrate with.
I think systems is his.
No, I'm thinking it's not, although he does have one. I was thinking of Gerald.
Gerald Chang?
Yeah, he used to have a point of sale that he built. But, yeah, I don't think he sells it. I don't think he ever got to the point where he was selling it. But he built one and he would demo it for you if you wanted. It was a register in a box. It had a little Mac Mini and a drawer, and he was serial opening the drawer. And I kept telling him, sell that thing. So it doesn't have the point of sale side, but I feel like that's not really. I don't feel like FileMaker is the best platform to build that in. FileMaker is a great middleware. It gets along so well with so many other people. Maybe that's because Apple for so many years had to do the heavy lifting to get along with corporate IT departments, that FileMaker has picked up that culture, but it plays really well with others. We have a lot of clients where they have 4 different systems, and FileMaker is the glue that holds all 4 of those together. None of them talk to each other, but FileMaker talks to all of them. It passes information back and forth.
So have you thought about standardizing your own API so that other people can integrate with your systems when they host it?
So we haven't quite as far as what you're implying. Our scripts are pretty close to an API because they all take parameters, and with FileMaker's native RESTful API, it is very easy to build an API interface on top of that. We have not built an interface layer that makes this a real RESTful API environment. Yeah. Part of that's because we lean really heavily into REST-FM, which I still believe is an amazing RESTful API platform. FileMaker's is good. But there's some stuff I like about REST-FM almost a little more. So we're still using REST-FM in a lot of places where we could probably have flipped the switch and turned that over to FileMaker's native RESTful API. REST-FM is super easy to deploy. It's open source now and freeware, and it's just a great tool. We really like it.
Somebody also built a package for it to actually work with the data API.
Yeah.
So if you really want to, you could probably do that.
Yeah. So this is only a few decisions away from having a RESTful API into it. You could call all those scripts, all those scripts under the hood, have the parameters in the script name. You can call most of them very easily. What you would do is you would call the function script that the button scripts call in all those instances. If you want to create a new invoice, there's a new invoice button that calls the new invoice function. If you pass it in the parameters, it will create the invoice for you. So you could call those very easily. We just haven't extracted that one layer higher, partially because we still view these as starter systems. So many people wouldn't need that layer that we didn't want to build that and put it as a burden on top of development. A reasonably clever developer could build a very simple API layer on top.
And that's the key. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is that as you start to branch out and make different products that are based on the same framework, so to speak, you're fragmenting your solutions a little bit, where
A little
like,
bit.
if you have to add a feature that's at the core of all these
Right.
systems, you're now having to do it 4 times.
We'd have
And
to
that's
do
what a
it
lot
3,
of
4, 5, 6 times, yeah.
that's what a lot of developers struggle with, all the vertical market developers, or like, how am I going to revise my product?
Yeah. And we have that, we have added things to this as a starter solution that I thought, well, we've added things to client solutions I thought, should I take this back to the starter solution and make it available to everybody?
Yeah.
You know, a classic example is something like Elastic Email and email integration. So many clients want to send a cleverly formatted email that we could abstract template name, parameters, merge data into a system and build a correspondence component. If I did that, I think that, in my world, is isolatable enough where I'd want that in a separate file anyway. I tend to think core, file, and communications are enough separate entities where putting that in a separate file doesn't bother me. I don't think the overhead for multiple files is that bad. I know in some worlds you get naming issues when you're on shared servers and then you have to rename it yourself. And some people, I don't think many people are paying per file for hosting. I don't think most of the hosting providers are sticking you with one file at a basic, but
Yeah.
and then you move it in. It's not too hard to merge FileMaker files. I don't think that's a, so we haven't done that, but I get the argument.
Yeah, and on the flip side, like if you do take too many things and put them back into your solution, then you know at some point in time it's not really a starting point anymore.
Right.
That people can understand and build on top of.
Right.
You're trying to make like a complete one size fits all thing.
I had a really good friend for a while who worked at a company called All Media Guide, and they had keywords for movies. You know, is it a dark movie? Is it a buddy comedy? Is it a cop movie? And I remember her talking about how vehemently they would defend that list. That, you know, is brooding and dark the same keyword? Because if you get too many keywords, none of them mean anything.
Yeah.
But you want to get the right amount. And I think back to that story every once in a while, particularly in the context of this, because we want to defend the core product and put only those things in it that a statistically significant number of systems are going to need without adding features.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I love FM Starting Point. I think it's an amazing tool for the cost. For anybody who doesn't know, that cost is $0.
Yeah.
It is an amazing starting point. And we have used it internally, but I find myself turning parts off. And every time we've deployed it, I'll turn off a thing or two or three or four.
Right.
And I wanted a system where you turned off nothing.
Yeah.
Where it was always this plus. Because I find having things I don't use in the system personally frustrating. Now, FM Starting Point is an amazing tool, and I think everybody should use it if it's appropriate, because you can't beat free dollars. And I realize ours isn't free dollars, but I wanted something that fit that middle ground well.
At the same time, something like FM Starting Point, when that person with $3 takes it to somewhere to get developed, it could potentially cost them more.
It could.
Because it's harder to add something onto something that's tremendously complicated than something like this, where it's easy and all pretty straight laid out.
That's where we feel the sweet spot is. Are we finding that sweet spot? We've got a few years under our belt at this. I think we're in a good place. I'm hoping we get some good feedback where people say, if somebody starts asking for the same feature over and over and over, yeah, we're going to start to move that into the core product. Yeah. And that's where, we're good developers. Adding something to 4 or 5 or 6 files is just not that hard. I have added something to this. We add things to customers' files a lot when we start with this, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And correspondence is close for me. I've almost added correspondence management because almost everybody wants to send emails from their system, right? So, I can add it in like a half an hour. If you're using Elastic Email and you've got your templates built, it's just really easy. I've got the scripts under my belt to add really good Elastic Email integration simply in a half hour. Now, how deep do you want to go? Where's your data coming from? How robust do you want it? How dynamic do you need to be? Do you need to get the results from your email? Okay, all that can expand the time. But if you say, I need to click a button and send this email and I've already got the template in HTML, can you help me get that going? I'll say, yeah, let's set up an Elastic Email account. If you don't send 50,000 a month, it's going to be $0 a month for the sending.
Yep.
and I can get it in for you in probably, counting this conversation, an hour.
Yeah.
That's not a pitch to anybody listening online, that's just,
I like it. No, I like it. I like that approach.
You were looking for kind of ideas of which to push first.
Yeah, so we're just kind of curious, which do we send out next? 'Cause
I'm not in the market for either of them, but what I'm hearing so far is that CC services seems more clearly defined. Like, I understand exactly who the target market for that is.
Yeah. We don't have that battle yet.
And the product, like, it all makes sense to me at this point. And CC retail is a little.
Well, we don't have that quandary about did you build the, that question we still ask ourselves. Well, did you build the point of sale line? Well, no. And maybe, and I think the name's probably wrong. I think it's probably, CC inventory might be better, because that's really what it is. It's begin plus inventory. Yeah. So, CC warehouse. There's a name there. And part of what we do next is not about the code. The code is really actually 98.5% done for both of them. It's getting the sample data right, and then it's the branding and the naming and the building the help files out, right? We just got to start making some tutorial videos and make the help and then make the documentation and stuff like that. Because we've got others under the hood. We're probably going to do, unless other people online or in this room give me other ideas, we want to do one of these, 3 to 4 of these a year forever, forever. TS. Forever's a long time, but we're thinking of maybe a CC studio that's about the class scheduling, the yoga studio, the martial arts dojo, the dance studio, CC gallery that's about the artwork on the wall and the people who run those small gallery type of. We have other ideas that are.
A content creation pipeline, blogging or video creation.
Yeah, so we've thought about that one.
Those are the things that I do. I've built my own hodgepodge solution.
So it's a great.
I've seen one solution that was awesome, but it was built by an in-house team of 4 developers for Nickelodeon. So they wouldn't let me take pictures of it. I was like, this is really cool.
It's a lot like project management services, but there's so many more pieces involved.
Yeah.
So I've thought about that one. For me, the quandary is it's so deeply nested in the integration, right? Content management doesn't matter much until you have a place to deliver that content. And so if it's just about managing the projects for the content creation, that's one thing, but I feel like we really have to do a lot of market research to say, how deep do we need to go on the hooks? Are we sending content out to, the easy one to pick is WordPress, right? Are we sending content out to WordPress?
No, I'm not so much talking about creating the content inside here, but tracking that pipeline.
Right.
So writing a blog post might have to be signed off by
right. And you've got those content creators you're hiring, and it's,
yeah, it's more in that project management.
Yeah, it's more the project management. And so that's
what you have.
But more than so it's a nuanced project management. So if it's about the project management side, then I don't know. Yeah, we've talked about it, but it's.
For example, I do 3D modeling, and I created a 3D model just for one 3D model. It might only take me an hour to an hour and a half. There's 3 separate checklists I have to go through to check off about 45 items. Just things that I can't forget to do, or something will go wrong with the entire model. And that's just to make it and then to actually publish it at this store, at this store, at this store, at this store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does CC Services have a products or master invoice items list?
Products does have a master, it has that. Services has a task management component that has master tasks. So you can do task templating, yeah. So you could do a very simple, we haven't gone so far as to say project styles, which I think kind of what you're talking about. So if you're doing a 3D model, here's the 3 phases, and each phase has task lists. We haven't done quite that far in that one, that kind of templating. It'd be really easy to get to, and we've started with this for other people. We have a project we did very recently that could have been 100 hours, but it ended up being, I think, 30.
Most of it there.
Yeah.
Services is you've got the project tasks and you already have time tracking.
Yep.
I think the piece of the whole thing.
Yeah, and it would be really easy to add. Is that enough to be a nuanced own version of it? Maybe, I don't know.
If you're doing 40 years.
Yeah. Well,
Like 5
there's
years
some-
from now, that's gonna look like a really good idea.
Yeah, and it might be like, no ideas are, that's one of the things we talk about these products is no idea is a bad idea. We had an in-house developer that talked about, I don't know if anybody's ever played the game, but Magic the Gathering, right? He wanted to do a Magic the Gathering starter
Wizards of the
solution.
Coast has FileMaker.
They do. And he built a pretty nice Magic the Gathering deck builder in FileMaker. It was pretty cool. He wanted to, a lot of our developers have, pet projects and stuff they're working on. You gotta have something to work on when you're learning. Not every client wants to pay for people to learn. Actually, a better way to say that is no client wants to pay for people to learn. So, you gotta learn on a pet project.
I built an interface.
Yeah.
That's what my happiness is when I found out that Wizards of the Coast also uses net perception.
Do they? That's awesome, yeah.
They were trying to hire a developer, and one of the skills they had on the list was like experience with net perception.
So,
Open DPR.
you started this as was,
Yes.
open.
Open,
I'm
unlocked.
going to write
Not
this 8 years experience.
So it depends on what you mean by supported.
I mean-
If something doesn't work, let us know. We'll fix that right away. If you want some help figuring something out, send me an email. I tend to answer most emails for free. If that email is, can you describe the script I would need to add this feature? I'm going to say yes in less than 2 hours. And here's an invoice for those 2 hours. We're glad to support them. We have had people pay us for, we don't do less than an hour of work at a time just because it's untenable for us. And we've had people ask for 15 minutes of work, and I just talk them into 45 more minutes of work that we could do. I can say, well, if you're doing this, you probably want to do this next. And if you did that, you probably also want one of those. And I can do all that in an hour. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if you said I wanted this, but you remember that elastic email integration thing that you said would be an hour? Yeah, I'll do that, but I will charge you the hour for it. But we do support them. If you have a question, we'll answer it. It's not like the as is, where is car off the used car lot. It's a product that we support. We're glad to answer questions. And we try to be good product vendors. Just like, Dave with FN Perception, you send him an email and ask him a question, he's going to answer it. If that question is, will you run my DDR for me? The answer is going to be yes, and it will only cost you an hour. Or here's a link to the video to show you how to make a quick key on the Apple computer.
Do you find yourself?
Those quick keys.
Do you find yourself ramping up your support or having videos, having more of a help center?
Yeah, we went through a period of time where we were doing about a video a week. We got really busy and those videos tapered off. We've got one more we owe the community on the under the hood on the settings. And then we've kind of got the batch of videos that we wanted to get out. John Vickery, who's kind of 3/4 of the way to the back of the room, is actually a product manager for this. So we've got a guy that's product manager for this. He's not a developer, but he can answer most questions. And he knows my email address and phone number, and I get the ccbegin@Cleveland Consulting emails just like he does. And yeah, we try and take the support of these pretty seriously. It's not just a fire and forget product.
Are you putting most of them on YouTube then?
Yeah, so all of our tutorial videos have been on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look for the Cleveland Consulting channel, or if you go to our web
Yeah,
page,
that's what I was looking at. I just wasn't seeing.
I think we've got an old YouTube channel that has a couple videos. We may have taken that down or privated it because we did a different one with a new branding. But if you go to our website, we've got a blog and all the videos are linked there. We also have a Facebook page. I think we linked them on there too. But we really don't use Facebook very much. It's just a necessary evil in the world of social media marketing.
Yeah.
If Zuckerberg wants to call me and complain about calling it an evil, that's fine. I'll have the conversation with him. But
I'll let you know if Google censors our video when we try to upload it.
Sorry, that's a strategy, because these
No.
kind of questions have come up a lot, even in our company. Did you end up telling the developer to do this?
Well, so sort of. So we built an in-house version of this. We had CCBegin as, I think we called it, starter solution or something on our servers. We had it for a while. Right. It was growing over time. We got to where we liked it. We were kind of, not in a hubris way, but we were a little proud of the work we'd done. It was starting to feel really useful as we started systems, which was great. When we built CC Retail and CC Services, we pulled a developer to build those two because we wanted to see, all right, just take some time. What does it take to make another version with, if CC Begin is X, and CC Retail is X plus 1, what does plus 1 take us in time?
Your strategy.
A deep dive at really complicated processes. Because how much can we really add on in a reasonable amount of time? Not in 1,000 hours. Not 6 months of hardcore
Well,
development.
it gets back to your 40-hour
Yeah.
guy that wants, has to pay for 40
Yeah.
hours worth of work, which obviously you can't get. But
Right.
But you can probably pay, $1,000 plus,
Yeah.
20, 30 hours.
Yeah.
For you to
And
customize.
20 hours gets a lot. 20 hours gets you a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's a really robust environment. We built a lot of other things, and we really believe hard in that as much value for the dollar as we can deliver. So if I built it before, I'm not gonna, if I built it for somebody and they said, I need this, and I say, well, it's gonna take me 10 hours to build that. And they say, great, I want it for 10 hours. And then if you come to me and I say, I need this, and it's that thing I built for 10 hours and I can put it in your system for 2, I'm not gonna charge you 10. We charge a good rate for our time, and if it takes me 2 hours to do it, I'm gonna charge you 2 hours. Maybe that makes me an idiot, but I sleep better at night.
As long as the paychecks, you come
Yeah.
back and go back.
I don't miss many meals, as you can tell, and nobody's taking my house from me. I feel good about myself every evening, so.
Good.
Very good.
Well, there are no questions from online.
The one feedback I heard is services. We're kind of leaning towards services more anyway. I think there's more service industry people than there are people who make to inventory.
Yeah. Well said.
So, any questions for me? I can't answer any questions about what FileMaker Next may contain. We can talk about 17. Everybody should go to DevCon, particularly if you've never been. At least it's not in Vegas this year.
Are you noticing?
Maybe. I've been a lot. The problem for us in going is I've been a lot, and for me, it's mostly social. I really love seeing people there. I didn't go to Vegas because I just kind of told myself I was never going to DevCon if it was in Vegas. I just didn't want to go. So I'm due to go. I want to go. We're really busy right now. We just have a lot of projects right now.
Yeah.
And for me to take a week functionally and just go dark
Even half the week.
is just, it's just a tough, if I was better, right, I would be sponsoring and have a booth and sell these products at the booth, but I'm just not that good a person.
Well, a year from now when you have 6 of them.
Yeah, and we're probably gonna sponsor next year and have a booth, unless we've only sold 2 more. And if we've only sold 2 more of the then 4 products a year from now, they'll just be up on the website and we'll be answering 6 emails a year.
Yep.
But I think they'll do better. They've done pretty well so far. People seem to like them, so.
You don't work towards 6, you can sell CC 6-pack.
The CC 6-pack. Well, that will be the only 6-pack I have, so that makes sense.
You still have other developer shops.
There you go. We had
Questions?
anybody have any questions?
Nope. You're getting applause online.
Well.
That's good. And from us. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. A little shout out, if you're not using, where is that? It's Command Option Control R for me. If you're not running FM Perception, you probably should be. You should be running some analyzer tool, and FM Perception is fast.